Alright guys, we're back. I did some Tarantino-esque editing for this one, maybe. I shot some other footage on an old phone of ours that I'm having trouble getting the footage off of, so that's going to go at the beginning of this episode, or maybe not, I'm not sure. But basically it involves cleaning out the interior of this case with some Q-tips and some vinegar for the corrosion. And then I talk a bit about DB cable, which this is not, but it was probably DB to whatever, I forget what this one's called. Old printers, basically. I'm not sure what the one I actually took apart was. I tend to use DB25 because they have boxes for transferring data, such as this guy here. You can basically switch 25 different leads with the turn of a switch there, and they have a an associated connector, which was pretty common but not really used too much anymore. So that's something I use a lot of. We'll get into that later. But similar cables to that have a lot of like these stranded pairs. It's nice stranded wire with color-coded pairs. This is like purple and purple with a black stripe. It might even be purple with a white stripe if you look close. Actually, I think it's just solid purple. Anyway, to review, this is our pitch circuit. Don't point with that finger. Here's our pitch circuit. There's a hanging Chad resistor on the back that we're going to solder another lead to when we flip this board over so that we can toss a switch and run it through its standard resistor, the stock one, basically. And what I'll do there is probably hot glue it to the board so it's got one leg in with one leg hanging off, and then solder to that, and then probably encase that in some hot glue. It's a little janky, but whatever. So what we've got going on this side, we've got most of our membrane leads. We covered this in the last episode. They go to your melody buttons, we'll call them, whatever. And then a bunch of the leads, basically those last few, it includes that green wire. The rest are accessible via the ribbon cable, and the 4 that we're after on this membrane are the 4 sound effects. It's all in notes in the last episode, and we'll review that at some point here. So what remains to do is add wires for the looping function, add wires for the audio connection, because we're going to need to pirate the audio signal, whatever, get the audio signal from where the leads are. And I'd like to keep the original speaker intact and run wires so that when you plug it in, there's a speaker disconnect jack, and I'll show you that later. But essentially, when a 1/4-inch cable is plugged in, it cuts the speaker off, and in turn runs the lead simply to the 1/4-inch cable, wherever you're running that. We need and we don't need. We've got our positive lead here that'll be positive voltage. That's black with a white stripe. And then there's ground, just black. Those are twisted together. we're going to be able to get the leads for the capacitor bends off of this and ground, basically. We just use the shared leg of the resistor, which is the black leg, or the black and red lead, and then there's the other end of the resistor. The resistor will be run to different potentiometers, and then we'll have various push buttons that connect caps in parallel with this capacitor that's here, C6, I believe. No, C3, R6, I want to say is what those are on the board. We'll verify that. Just trying not to flip the board over a lot because it strains the membrane and the ribbon cables. So I want to get everything that I can off of this side of the board and then flip it. So what do we have to do? We got to add the looping leads, which I've got in my hands here. So those are leads 7 and 8, which I'm pointing to there with the bare wires. The wires are already tinned, so I'm just gonna, I think, looks like we're going in from this side with our other leads, so we'll continue that sort of orientation. Just gonna tin the tip of our iron a little bit and then solder them in place. I don't know if I talk much about soldering in this. I just sort of show it. You know, this is an IC here, so we don't want to... I mean, I suppose I could look and see if, by like we did with the membrane, trace out these leads so I don't fry the IC. Looks like one is here. One of them. And I don't know what that is. I think it's a transistor because it's got those 3 legs there. It's probably some sort of switching. We'll do the transistor for giggles. There's one in place. Now we'll trace out. Looks like the other... I better double check what I'm doing here with my multimeter, but also my eyes. So that's that one. The next one we're going for is this one above it. Looks like that goes to this fellow here. 7, 8. All right. Let's see if I can bring this forward one. Always helps if you can plan this stuff a little bit better ahead of time. Clearly, I'm doing this a little off the cuff. So looking again, this fellow right here, that are the same. Good enough. So about soldering, you just need to hold things in place a little bit. Sometimes feed on a little extra solder. I've tinned the wires, so hopefully this isn't too problematic. I'm carefully bending that so it just wants to not touch the board. There's a slight bare area on that wire. I probably could have trimmed it a little better, but the joints look fairly okay and shiny and connected. Here, I'll check them with my multimeter too while I'm at it. Make sure that we're all good here. So 7. Or that was 8. This is 7. Looks good. So there's 2 alternate spots basically that we can connect to. Hope you all saw that. I don't know. Anyway, so that's our looping. Sneak that out. Again, easy does it with this. I might leave, well, try to put that through as well. So I'm feeding all the cables through this hole in the battery compartment. I'm just going to mount everything, or just bolt this right to the lid once I close it back up. Like, I'm going to leave the body solid and then bolt this back up. And then, but before I bolt it back up, I'm going to, boy, how am I going to do that? Yeah, I guess I'm going to have to use bolts that feed through the back. I can't just screw it directly to the cover, or I won't be able to screw the 2 halves back together. So I'll have to mount some bolts inside this that pass through holes, and then put some nuts on the bottom. Perhaps I could on the interior of the closure box. I suppose I could put like T-nuts inside this thing or something like that, like glue them in place and then just run bolts through into the nuts. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how. I had an idea of putting like brackets on this, but I thought it'd look messy and be hard to deal with. So we'll figure out some sort of thing. And that's only if this actually gets properly bent, because who knows? I could have fried it already. We'll find out. All right, so carefully. Ugh. Okay. This thing is very delicate. It's almost like it's meant to have the membrane unclipped from it. This is very obnoxious. Okay. Normally I like to solder directly to the board. I want to make sure I get the right leads for the speaker jack, and we determine, okay, so the one on, never have my marker when I need it. Well, whatever, we can scratch a little something into the board here. Terrible. Okay. So positive is the side towards the bottom. this way. Negative is the lead on the top that way, theoretically. So once again, carefully flipping, trying not to kink this sucker. It would appear these are our audio leads here. Those two, I do believe. So I guess we'll carefully try to pull one out of there. Let's see if that's accurate. So I'm trying to figure out a tool properly for this. What I think I'm going to do is try to grab the wire from the opposite side of the board while I heat the solder side of the board and just pull out the wire carefully. And what I'll probably do is just do this with needle nose. I was thinking maybe I would do it with hemostats, but not sure. I'm not seeing where my hemostat is. So we're just going to grab with these needle nose pliers and I think kind of like rotate it to just kind of pull it out. So I've got a hold of this bottom one, and we're going to add a little solder. And there it is. Not too bad. I think I'll solder suck that. So we have a hole to pass a wire through. Not too shabby. Okay. Now I guess we're going to do the other one. And we're pretty sure, well, we're just going to leave the same orientation of those wires on the underside. But if I recall correctly, positive is this one, negative is that one. So we'll grab this wire again. I'm just turning this needle nose plier like a key while I heat this lead. And there it went. That seemed to work pretty well. Solder suck that lead. Careful, you got to watch for wires that are already attached here. Probably wait on that a second. All right, there's our fresh leads, or fresh holes. Who doesn't love a fresh hole? Audio leads are going to be yellow, and then I'll use the yellow with the black stripe to indicate the negative lead of the speaker. Tin these. Here, I'll even show you me doing this for a change. You're trying to basically draw the solder through the fibers of the wire to the heat source, as I understand it. the solder flows to the heat. So you want to really like try to get the solder to coat those wires. You're not like painting it on there. Also, this is not a product endorsement, but don't get one of those like old Radio Shack machined tip soldering irons. They just won't work. You want those kind of tips that look like Weller tips, for lack of a better way to explain it. I don't know what the difference is, but man, you'll know it when you use one. Okay, so here's my wires. The speaker can just come out now, I think, carefully. And so it was like this, crossed over. So there's your, so the positive lead is on this side facing me. The negative lead is on top. Sometimes it's weird how you get, when you're flip-flopping boards and stuff, you got to double check things. Remember orientations. God, it reminds me of the horrible Iowa tests where they'd like have you figuring out what pieces of paper all folded up and hit with a hole punch would look like unfolded. Just very odd spatial orientation tests. Okay, so where did the yellow wiry stuff go? Here it is. So we've got positive on the side towards us and negative on the side away from us. There's the neighbor dogs howling along to the fire trucks. All right, well, that's one of our wires in there, so we're going to get it while the getting's good. Gosh, that sticks through a lot. I guess I could kind of fold it over on itself here. There, that's not, yeah, like so maybe. It's also good if, when you're soldering leads, if you can have them kind of just want to sit in place and not move around on you. That's the other tricky part about soldering wires to boards I've found. Well, one of many. Some are easy, some are hard. It just depends on sometimes. But if you can set yourself up for success. I'm also I think I'd like to clip the very end of that as well, just to get that out of here. Of course, now it's under that membrane right there. Get out of here. We better get that out of the machine before it goes back together. Okay, so there is that. The wire's in that hole. I don't know if you can see it. Barely. Looks nice and shiny. That's what you're going for, is a shiny coat. Basically, you just touch it, try to heat everything evenly. Don't move it around a bunch and sit there on it. Just, you want to be in and out with it very quickly, because you don't want it to be too hot for too long either, because you don't know what component you're also heating by heating the traces. So, back to this. We're going to feed positive lead through, hopefully. Of course, it's going to be way more stubborn than its buddy. Angle it a little bit so it wants to stick through. again, just trying not to stress this board very much. You could be a lot rougher with other boards, and maybe it would be smart to remove that membrane. We'll see if it still functions after this one. If it doesn't, I think next time I'll just take it right the hell off of there before I do any more. Oh my goodness. This is, of course, very obnoxious. I'm sure an easier way to do this, but I think squatting down so I can see what I'm doing might help. Now let's try it left-handed. Great idea, Austin, but it actually does help me see. And how about that? Whoops, it was in the hole. Okay, and it is now. Fold it over. Oh. Get back in there. Okay, now it's folded down over onto its trace. I've pinned the wire on my stool apparently, and then just a quick touch with the iron and we're in business, I think. Boy, get out of the way. Tin it just a little. That's in there. Okay, so we'll have to figure out how to connect that to the internal speaker and to the jack coming out. In fact, I think I'm just gonna I'll add long leads to the coming from the speaker, and then I'll just trim everything to fit. It's always good to have too long of a connection rather than too short of a connection, because then you got to redo your wire if it won't reach, or join it in the middle, which is fine, but it just looks so messy. And then if you change color wire or whatever, it's just, you run out of that one color, then you're adding complications into reading sort of the logic of your wiring later. Okay. Tin these. All right. Here we've got our speaker. These might be smarter just to clip rather, but let's see if we can desolder. Not too bad. That's our negative lead, so we'll use the wire with the black stripe for that. Looks like shit, but speaker leads always look kind of garbagey, it seems like. Let's add a little. Okay. Hey, that did not look great, but now if I guess I go to, because I probably didn't pin the wire into place like it would want to sit naturally. Maybe if I do, I don't know, perhaps on a flat surface would be smarter for this. But they're on there. I mean, it's not my prettiest soldering by any means, but I have a feeling it's fine. So I'm just going to leave it for right now, and we'll worry about that later. All right, I think I'm done for a minute. All right, and we're back. I think I've got everything that goes to this side of the board. So, carefully raising and supporting, turning. Now this is the tricky part, it would seem. So, just want to put these screws back in easily and gently, and they are, I believe, so this is where I was a little bit stumped. I'll put all the long ones back because we're going to be, but there's two or more sizes of short screws in this thing. I think some of these are in the exterior, probably the longer ones. It would appear 3 are in that short side. This leaves some very odd remaining screws, which, well, I mean, I'll just have to, I think, go with. Suppose I could check my work. I also have a jar of tiny screws. Comes in handy. I mean, it's not that far off. I say that, and then I should probably be careful where I'm adding these damn things. The Golden Sound Stories are a magnificent source of tiny screws because I end up just basically gutting them and leaving an empty shell behind. I just want the circuit board. It goes directly to a DB connector, so I can switch it around like a different cartridge almost to go into the synthesizer control. I guess I'll show that off, but that's a device that I've used. Well, I'll show it off eventually, but that's a device I've used for Boing Dweeby, my band of cohorts that improvise electronic stuff, sometimes live. Well, always live, but sometimes in front of people. Most of the time not. Anyway, Tiny screws, man. Look at them all. Yeah, so I could keep going, I suppose. Let's see if we can get this thing done here. Or at least put back together somewhat. I'm going to plug in my hot glue gun. That's what you're hearing now. There's our R6 and then C3. That's our cap that is of interest. So with R6 here, we've disconnected that, but I'm going to put just a tiny dab of hot glue here to kind of mount that to the board so it doesn't flex around, and then I'll solder to the end of this a lead that'll go outside as well. But I wanted to wait until I was on the side of the board to do it. Again, it's not the most elegant fix, or I don't know, maybe it is at this point, but it's the least invasive, I guess, is what I'm going for on this one. And speaking of, we're probably stressing this membrane. So I'll kind of drag that up a little bit more. I'm going to figure out what screws to use on this and make sure none of my connections are being pinched. Doesn't look like it. I mean, it seems like these ones are bigger. I guess the deciding factor is going to be, well, maybe if it bottoms out or not. I mean, it doesn't seem loose. That seems too small. Maybe that's the one to put under the ribbon cable. Damn you. I hate it when I lose a fucking screw. And if you haven't been able to tell, I've lost a few screws in my day. But you'd think I'd have a solution for this by now, but and I certainly welcome any. I do have like a magnetic wand I can drag around to try to corral them, but it doesn't always work so hot. This seems a little loosey-goosey with a long one in there. So I'm going to assume that the short ones go along, or the long ones go along the side facing me, and the little short guys go on the side. Why, I don't know, but we're just going to go with it. Probably has something to do with the rounding of the case, I have a feeling. Even though it doesn't seem to... be the same diameter necessarily, hey, as that rounded outer part of the hole. I mean, you can see where around the screw hole from what looks like a bigger screw, but right at this point, we just got to get this thing back together. Okay, it's in, starting it. Don't want to stress out a ribbon cable. All right, there she is. Put this tape just back down, I guess. I don't know. Get all these extra little screws out of here. We want our speaker in place. We can feed those leads through the hole, so I'll go with the rest. Come on, fellas. And I think what I may do, just for funsies, keep things kind of neat and in place, is maybe glue a couple of hot glue a couple of zip ties in place on the back of the toy's housing, so that it will keep those wires kind of nicely in place and out of the way of things. So how does this fit in here exactly? Maybe just like it is. Maybe. Not quite. Or is it? Almost looks like, there it is. It just kind of slides in. Presses in. Okay. So, just kind of bring those wires. And that's nice about the speaker now. You can just kind of lift it out. It's not attached to the board anymore, so that's a bonus. All right, there's our wires. So honestly, I think if we just kind of like flatten some of these a little bit so that they're not in the way of these like pegs where plastic parts might come together, such as those cross pieces. All right, maybe it wants to go this way instead. Shove that under here, there, somewhere. Okay. I mean, looks fairly neat. Oh, you guys can't see anything. Okay, well, that's what rearranging those wires is what I was just doing. Okay. Yeah, well, there it is back in place. Oh, except I've got to glue my resistor in position carefully, and then glue a zip tie in there just to cinch up those wires. All right. Tiny bit of hot glue. That's not too bad. Hopefully I didn't heat up that IC. I don't think I was in too direct contact with it. All right, so there's that. Even kind of flatten that down, and the protruding lead up. Okay, and that was going to be our green with a black stripe. Hey, it's easy to get ahead of yourself. Well, while I'm waiting for my soldering iron to heat up, maybe I can put a zip tie in place. Just hanging around here somewhere. Loose. Those are always nice. It's still kind of nasty there. Well, I bet the soldering iron is hot now, so we'll get that going. Looks all right to me. I don't think NASA would approve, but the joint looks silvery and together, and I'll probably reinforce that joint with a dab of hot glue as well, just so it doesn't get popped off the board. It might be a good move for some of the others as well. We've got positive voltage over here. Don't want to be too heavy-handed with it, but you know, good for keeping certain things from moving around too much that are easy to pop once you apply pressure inadvertently. And so this can go along here and through with his buddies. think that's everything from that side of the board. Get those maybe up above there. Tuck that under there, I guess.